I hope it works.
Friday we went to her.
Oh.
She's had her convertible for 27 years. And the last new car she got was in 2000. And she had 37,000 miles on it. We were going to buy her a new one.
And you saw what that said.
2016.
You're allowed to do it.
Then she had all these seizures and couldn't drive. So she wants a small SUV. She doesn't want to.
Well, if they're making decisions right there.
But that.
Yeah, what'd you end up with?
Well, we're going back to
Yeah, I just
Australia.
want to run it.
I like them. I haven't bought a car yet. My sister comes from Syracuse to get cars there because she says it's a better price and they're great to deal with. I think they've bought 2 or 3 cars there.
Now, what's your SUV?
Mine is a Ford Escape. It's 8 years old already.
Because we
Never had a car that long.
Christmas Raleigh, my next door neighbor, has
A newer one, though, doesn't she? I
She's got
see
a
her at
second
church.
one now.
Yeah.
And she's Lily's 5'10", and so she drove that. And she likes either the Highlander for Toyota or the Ram. And we haven't driven it because color is important to her.
I can understand that. Isn't that how you pick a car?
So I told her, what you can do is find something that's
Oh, isn't she adorable?
Lisa for 3 years.
Her accent and the way she delivers the stories. I mean, she's so animated and yeah.
And
Hi,
2016, almost 17
nice
years.
to see you.
We got it in 99. Then only had
How many times are we going to do this thing?
many miles.
How many ways? Good. How are you?
Yeah.
What's reading?
I didn't eat dinner before I came here, did you?
Oh yeah, I never make it.
Oh, I could not eat and get a shower and get here and
Oh, you
come.
do chores.
No, I don't do chores weekends. But I will tell you that the food last night was good. So we were doing burger, yeah, it was real good.
So where was that?
I'm having that bread.
Where was Papa?
Papa was playing poker.
He was me. I was going to
Carol.
speak
Carol's tough.
old report in color today, and I'm glad so he's got this for us.
Oh, he does. Yeah, and that's why I like to include her.
Last week, what's this last week? I did my report. We didn't have any trouble.
Yeah. You have a tip?
Yeah, if you go to settings to display, and then it should give you an option for a dual screen.
Well,
Last week was automatic.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Windows 10.
So settings, display.
You broke it.
No, I think it was me that used it last.
You were last week.
I was.
You were.
We had other technical difficulties, but not
You can
that.
do that, but I'm not sure which one it is.
All right, so
Where's your
Technology's great when it works. So bad.
Weren't we just talking about our IT people?
Yeah.
yeah, if you know what you're looking at.
I'm guessing. Right there, right there.
Yeah, control alt delete.
Yeah, that takes care of everything.
There you go.
Yeah.
When all else fails. I said today at work I'm going off the grid. I'm done.
That's the
Okay,
Yeah, I
we're
didn't
watching.
read it.
Oh, boy. Something happened.
So you're identified as two, but
What's on the bottom up there?
Walk a fine line.
And go up there and straighten out.
Another screen.
It's on.
Hammer.
Oh my.
Something.
Look at that.
Now you've got the, now you can play.
That's, yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, my goodness.
I think that's how it is.
Thank you very much. That's great.
Thank you.
And you get two screens, and one doesn't play, you take it and swipe it all the way to the right.
If you do the two-screen, but last week we were just mirroring. But whatever.
Mirroring is where you want to be, but
Yeah.
I couldn't find it for 10.
Probably restart, right? That'll take care of it.
No, actually, it'll stay where it is.
Thank you very much.
Is that that's not the entire thing, is it? So if you
Yeah,
go
you
over
can
to
just-
the right and pull it over to extend bottom right corner?
No, just go down.
Just hit that box at the top, I think. There you go. See if that works.
Hey! What do you know? Woo!
Let me go put you on the spot. He comes early.
Yeah, it's a good thing you came early.
Are we ready to start?
Yes. All right, Jim, all yours.
I'm answering this.
So I guess we're back to water here, and I guess what I want to go over tonight is kind of maybe a little recap of what we discussed before with regards to providing water to areas of the town that aren't served right now. And I really kind of want to walk through the process. I think we talked a little bit about the funding process, which is what we're kind of looking for, particularly rural development. So I kind of want to walk through that process and what some of the steps are to hopefully make one of these projects a reality. The areas in red represent the areas that are currently unserved. And actually, there's obviously areas further to the north as well, but a good portion is areas south of 31, currently not served there. So the town had hired Jay Grassa to do the income survey. Results of that were, I guess, good in terms of getting the MHI, meeting household income, below that target level. Came up with about $45,000, which is slightly below what rural development considers poverty level. So that's kind of step one of qualifying for that poverty interest rate and maximum grant dollars that you can get from rural development. So if you look at kind of a sheet I put together here, just an overview of the funding process. If we talked about there's different interest rates depending on your category, whether you're considered poverty, intermediate, or market conditions. Right now, the poverty rate for loan is 2.375, and the intermediate is 3.25, and that rate just changed. It came out with new guidance the past few days. If we can get that poverty rate on the grant side, you're eligible for up to 75%. And in the report we did, we kind of ran 3 scenarios in the back of that report looking at different project costs. And looking at market rate, interest rate with no grants. We did intermediate interest rate with 45%, or up to 45% grant funding. And then we did poverty, which is kind of the third scenario. So we're kind of, I guess I'd say we're kind of halfway there in trying to get that poverty level interest rate and grant eligibility. So, the other step, I've had conversations with the state engineer for rural development, had another conversation with the state director, Brenna Smith, out of Syracuse. To meet that other half of getting that poverty rate, you have to basically cite that there are well deficiencies in the area you want to serve. So what they want to see is they want to see a letter from Monroe County Department of Health that is basically citing that there are deficiencies there, quality, quantity issues, and certainly one way that a lot of towns try to address that is by doing some selective sampling in the system. Rural Development recommends that you do, if you can, up to 10% sampling of the area that you're looking to serve.
When you say deficiencies, you mean quantity or quality deficiencies?
It's going to be both, but they're obviously putting a lot more weight on the quality issues. So any type of water quality issues that can be demonstrated through testing.
And how, does a certain company have to do that, or how, is there specifics on how we do our sampling?
The department, the Monroe County Department of Health would provide some guidance on that.
Okay.
Yeah. But a lot of times it's something that could be done in cooperation with town personnel. Obviously, there has to be a lab to do the actual testing of it, but it could be, town or volunteers helping with the sampling and that.
Gotcha.
But certainly, we want to do that in concert with the Department of Health and make sure we're meeting their protocols, because in the end, we're going to need that agency to write that letter to rural development. So without doing those things, showing the well deficiencies and attempting a sampling plan, that then more than likely you're only going to then qualify for the intermediate, which once again only gets you up to that 45% of grant dollars.
If there's anything about past sampling, will that count?
I'm sure they would definitely, if there's any past sampling, they would definitely look at that. So if we have,
Because I know a lot has been done.
yeah, I think any historical information that could be provided would help support the cause here.
And how soon as a town job should we be working on this? Is this something we should be starting now, or?
Well,
do you-
I guess it goes hand in hand with the next step, which is your application process. So ideally, you want to be able to submit that information while you're also submitting the rest of your documentation for the application. And the application with rural development, it's a rolling application. They don't have a specific deadline, but their funding year starts. Well, they should find out sometime this month in terms of what their budget may look for next year. May not be appropriated until early spring, but certainly it's more advantageous to try to get in there earlier if possible.
Mm-hmm. And there may be, one thing we also discussed, I think I reported last week that Jim and I met a few weeks ago to talk about this and upcoming meeting. One other strategy might be, so there's what is the term? When all the money comes back to Washington. There's a term for it.
Yeah, the reallocation.
So
they have to have a mid-year and end-year, what they call bonding pool, in face of the states that haven't used up their allotment. Money goes back into the federal coffers, and those states that have used up all theirs and still have projects on deck waiting can put a request in the Washington saying, we've used up all our funding, you extra, we would like to receive some of that.
Is that in addition to us trying to make an application to the rural?
No, same money. So after the all the monies get spent by all the states on all these projects across the country.
Okay.
They haven't spent all their money. It goes back to Washington and back into the kitty here at the end of the year. So one strategy might be, if we can hustle and get an application in this year, we can see if there's any money left over. Then the application's already done. We might have to change dates and re-sign, whatever. But if we don't get it this year, we can resubmit in the spring for next year's tranche of money.
Yeah, you actually wouldn't even have to resubmit. If we got an application in December, regardless of whether they allocated money to this project or a project from the town for what came from bonding pool or what came from next year's authorization, your application would still carry over. You wouldn't have to resubmit.
Great.
And the application, they went to an online system a few years ago, RD Online. Lisa's starting to become familiar with it.
We now have a program.
Makes things so much
Took an
easier.
awful lot of facial recognition and all this crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know where they have my picture on file from, but somehow, yeah.
Post office.
So that's kind of the next step. doing that application, and I have spoke with rural development a little bit about project size and funding and that. And they don't know year from year how much they're going to get funded and what they're getting funded for this coming year. They're not sure, so that something weighs into how big a project they're willing to fund on its own, or they have funded larger projects. I would say their average size project probably is more in the, I would say, don't quote me, but probably more in that $3 to $4 million range. And so we looked at a report. If you watered up all the roads in the town, it's about a $33 million project. So we could submit an application for that. I would say,
Slimmer.
not saying we can't, but they're saying the chances are pretty slim that they would fund that large project.
Yes.
Yeah.
USDA rep got quite a wide smile when we mentioned that number to her. So, yeah, she recommended carving it up. She said typically it's their grant portion was $1 to $2 million, I think, and that would result in maybe a $3 to $4 million project on average.
Yeah.
And I've talked to some surrounding supervisors, Kendall, Clarendon, Clarkson, and their projects are all $750,000 to $2 million at the tops.
Yeah.
So I think what they've told me bears out what Cynthia from USDA said.
Yeah. I mean, occasionally they will fund a fairly large project, but I think all the stars have to align right, and I think sometimes people see that and think, well, they got funding for an $8 or $10 million project, we should go for that. But I guess we just don't see those very often, so I think, the best strategy is to try to right-size a project and look at this strategically. What's, the best, strongest application you can make to at least make that first step forward. And what a lot of towns do is they do a project a year, and every year they put an application in and hope to do another piece of the puzzle each year. So every year you're seeing construction out there, and every year there is a grant application being put in and an engineering report being done.
How much flexibility is it, Jim, with the rural development funding when they have their coffer for funds available? How much do you see up and down, or does it stay pretty? What the total money they're going to dole out, does it?
Yeah, it all depends on what Washington gives them, what the budget looks like. I think the past couple of years they've done all right. I would say that they've kind of been steady, and it seems like the last year or two they had a little influx. But there's never any guarantee that
Going to continue.
it's going to continue, right? Right.
Now, is Jay still involved in this process? Okay.
He is not. Doesn't mean he can't be. It's just that's. I think we'll get to that later in the discussion. What the options are for grant writing that portion of the project.
Yeah. So, like I said, really the big step is obviously submitting the application, and as part of that, the attachments are getting that support letter from the Department of Health, which means some sample results. They also need, as part of that application, the preliminary engineering report. We obviously did an overall report for looking at water for the entire town. What this preliminary engineering report, is what they call it, would have to really kind of focus on the specific project. What road or roads are you looking at for the application? Break down the user costs for those specific areas, more detailed environmental investigation of what things you may run into, wetlands or floodplains or Iraq, obviously. So,
Well, 2 quick points too. First of all, you probably remember when we had our large water meeting, unexpectedly large water meeting. We talked about the fact that it may take 3 or 4 years from start to finish to get a project done. And so what Jim mentioned in terms of sort of rolling projects, the idea would be, yes, from start to finish on the first project, but if we continue the process, we can phase this out and really accomplish a project a year if that's what the town board wishes to do. And so it would not be 3 to 4 years in between projects. Instead, we would do one annually, first of all. In terms of the second item, actually, I think you're going to touch on it, so I'll let you go, Jim. Sorry.
okay. No, anytime.
What's that road at the top?
Excuse me?
At the bottom of the screen or the very top of the screen?
Top of the screen.
That's heading into the village where the blue is. The red is south of the village.
What's the name of that road?
At the very top is
East and West Avenue.
Shumway.
Oh, you're looking.
Above the screen, Laura. Shumway?
And where is the school?
To the left. You don't
Yeah,
see
it's
it,
off
but
the screen at the
it's off
moment.
the
It's
screen.
above what we're
Where's
looking at.
Route 31?
You don't see it, would be just on the top of the screen there, but it's not shown
Yeah.
on the map there.
Okay, because I'm here for selfish reasons.
So, I guess the supporting documentation, we talked about the, for the application. The other thing is you have to prepare a preliminary environmental report, so that's what we're talking about, where you're looking at environmental factors, starting the secret process for the project that you're applying for. And there's doing the intent to be lead agency, the same, process the town board has been done many times in doing a coordinated review. I've listed all the agencies that may or may not be involved as part of this process. You also have to prepare what's called a preliminary and final notice of intent to undertake an action within an ag district. We are in fact in an ag district for any of these improvements. So another report, another step in the process. And financial statements from the town, audits, the other pieces of paperwork, all that goes into rural development, and then it's in there for review. And timing-wise, I guess it depends how busy you are. You may hear back in a couple months. You may hear back in 5 or 6 months. But what they'll come back with at that point is what's called the preliminary eligibility determination, where they've looked at your project, they've scored it, and they are basically making an offer to the town, saying we're willing to fund this project for X dollars in loan and X dollars in grant to try to get you to a certain rate. They try to get you to what they call their target service charge, which is usually around 2% of your median household income. So, roughly, I would say they try to get you to about $900 ballpark, and that would include debt service and the cost of your metered water.
Do you know if you didn't qualify or you didn't make it? Do they give you feedback on what you could have done better? So if when you try again for funding, if maybe your grant wasn't, or your application wasn't up to par,
Yeah.
did they give you feedback?
Yeah, they definitely would. They're always willing to sit down and meet with you. And I think in most cases, if you complete, a qualified application, you're going to get something. It's a question of how far down they're going to bring it. If they only come back and it ends up being a $1,300 project, then you're way above the controller's threshold there, and you've got some hurdles to cross. And when you get that preliminary eligibility determination, they recommend that you have a sit-down review meeting with them at that point and kind of go through their funding package and talk about next steps. Because it's nothing's finalized then, but we really haven't seen any projects where they pull the rug out from at that point. It's just a matter of now it's up to the town to take the next step to kind of get to the final commitment of funding.
And Lisa and Jim, have we heard anything back with regard to our question about having to pull incomes on a specific route? So Lisa, you did hear?
No, I didn't hear. They have
No.
not
We got
answered.
So this is still an open question. With the USDA, we asked Cynthia Newcomb when she was here, and she wasn't sure. So the question, I gave an abbreviated version there. So the question is, do we have to pull the actual household incomes on the route we choose and average those out and still be under the 45.5?
That was my understanding when I talked to Jay at the beginning.
We've received a number of different answers on that, and Cynthia could not answer that specific question.
Because if you live on a street with a lot of new constructions that are $200,000 or $300,000, and their incomes are obviously higher, that stretch might need to have another area included in it to bring that down, the median.
And that's how some of the answers are we've gotten, but some of them have been because our income survey was certified for that whole area. It counts as one area.
Even if you carve it out and do it in
we've gotten
sections?
different answers from different surveys.
See, I think that it's going to have an impact on that,
We've gotten different answers.
where it is.
Yeah, that's something, I know we've had conversations, and
And we can't get
we've
them.
gotten
It's
nothing.
really a preliminary question. We can't.
It's
I mean,
important.
How can we truly plan?
Yeah.
There's got to be somebody with the answer.
I think if you were doing the entire town, then it would work. But I think as you carve things out, you're going to end up having a difference of opinion on
See,
the
that's
median level.
It's not the way it works in Orleans County, for instance.
They're-
They get grants
they're-
on at the
they're
poverty level on
rural.
but on every single road, doesn't matter income or otherwise.
But-
If you have high income roads in the town of Kendall or the town of Clarendon, and they get water just as much as Clarendon now has, what did the supervisor tell us? 3 houses, 5
5
houses that don't have water.
They're designated rural, we're designated urban. Rural communities tend to get a lot more support financially for these water projects.
My understanding from those supervisors is it simply has to do with the poverty level.
Yeah.
That's the
They
only
still have to meet the same
factor
criteria.
that they look at. So we are now in that same pool.
Right.
So that's what makes me think, and Cynthia's first reaction was to say, no, you got the whole town, we're all set. Then she said, well, wait a minute. And that's where it's been
Yeah,
left.
so who's going to be the last word?
Well, the problem is, I fear that we have to submit and then just wait for an answer. I don't know who to get the answer from at this point.
Well, I'll reach out to the state again, see if I can get something in writing from them.
So we've knocked on a lot of doors for that answer and have yet to get one.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, so one of the answers was we've now been certified under the poverty level, that whole area. That was, and I have to get her name, Brenda, right? Is it Brenda?
Brenda Smith?
Yes.
Yep.
That's what she said, is we're certified as the poverty level.
Right. And she didn't make it.
Distinction
No,
about
she didn't.
roads or.
She didn't.
What's your question?
How do you determine what road you're going to start at?
well, we're getting to that.
Yeah.
We're getting to that. So go ahead, Jim.
So, yeah, steps after the preliminary eligibility determination. Now you're getting to finalizing your environmental report and seeker. It may mean if you triggered anything for cultural resources, you may have to have an archaeologist out there doing some test pits. If there's potential wetlands, or you have to do delineations, if there's any potential critical species or habitats, you have a biologist out there, locating those things. So these are really getting into more of the commitment of funds now for this project. I guess for the upfront items.
Page 3.
Once that's finally accepted and approved, then rural development comes back with their letter of conditions and obligation of funds, and that's really kind of like the contract where, okay, we're, what we gave you before was the preliminary offer. Here is, the contract to move ahead with the project here. And there's obviously another list of conditions to be met with that, and from there, start talking about interim financing, which would be, the town taking out a band for the short-term financing of the project. And, rural development would have a package, which would be loan and part grant. And you have to use all the loan dollars first before you can go into the grant dollars.
Mm-hmm.
From that point, you would do the formal creation of the water district. So that's preparing the map plan report, showing the boundaries of the district with the legal description. And it includes a lot of the same information that's in the preliminary engineering report. Where we're getting water from, capital cost estimate, what's the annual cost per user, for capital costs and O&M and miscellaneous other costs such as homeowners having to, run or pay the cost of the service from the right of way to the house. And from that point, we would be into moving ahead with the design, survey, design work, and ultimately bidding on the project. And that whole process, you have to follow road development requirements. Certain stipulations they have, like there's a American Steel Act, everything has to follow those regulations. They have other requirements, I guess, are specific to theirs, so I would say probably not as onerous as some of the EFC funding requirements. So from that point, I think they're a little more streamlined. But project obviously would have to be publicly bid, and project would then go from there. So back to the question, I guess, is where do you start? So we have to kind of look at size of the projects. I think we've got the word from EFC or RD. To do the whole town isn't something that probably is going to be realistic for funding. So you have options, and you can look at a few things. You want good support for the project, so based on the survey, where do you have strong support? You can look at the cost, what has higher density, so may have a chance of having a more affordable cost. And then probably most importantly, you have to look at where the infrastructure is right now. You may have Cape and Road may meet a couple of those criteria in terms of having density and one of the lower per EDU costs, but we still have to get the water there. So, one, I guess, opportunity that you can look at is trying to create the spine, I guess, of this project here. And we've always talked about Route 19 as kind of being the main route where most of your other roads are going to connect off of. So I think that would be one strong one to consider.
What if the one area had poorer water quality than maybe way higher as far as how bad it was?
Yeah.
Did that area have more money? Like you more of a chance to be funded?
Well, we have to, I guess if we're targeting areas, that would certainly help, I guess, because we still have to get that. It goes back to getting a support letter from the Department of Health.
I mean, and I don't know if that's true, but I just wondered if there was an area that really had poor water quality.
I don't know if the survey really touched on that at all in terms of.
We did ask for, this one.
But if we had a road that there was a desire for water, but we can't find any documentation, either past or present, for any well issues, it's going to be tough to get that letter from the Department of Health. So that would, probably move that lower on the totem pole.
Question?
Yeah. You're talking about the spine, you're talking about coming down 19 to start with?
That would be one potential.
Why would you do that when West Sweden Road has 3 water hookups?
All right, tonight is not a night for public comments or questions, okay? This is for the board to ask Mr. Oberst questions. I mean, if we will have a public hearing on this, but tonight is not that. I don't want it to turn into a lot, we want to hear from him so that we can make a decision what we want to come back to the public with. Doesn't mean it'll be a final decision. It's going to mean that we've heard from him, we've made an educated decision, okay?
Yeah, a lot of options to consider. I also have reached out to the Monroe County Water Authority just to see if they have any future network plans for their system, and if the town was to put any infrastructure in, would it be in concert with something they may have planned for the future? See if there's a potential where even if it's a case where we're putting a name in, they may want to pay to upsize it because it would be a benefit to them, so.
Sure.
So we want to look at those options.
So what is that, Kevin?
Well, these are the maps we had hung on the wall tonight with
Oh,
the quality and
okay.
quantity issues, as well as the yes and no questions being mapped out. So Jim, in conjunction with that plan, you want to mention the other stretch we were discussing?
Yeah, one of the areas we looked at was Redmond Road, particularly between White and 4th section. And that one, there's been certainly public interest in that road dating back, I'm guessing, at least 10 to 15 years.
No issues.
And where people have come in before requesting water there. And at the time, when the Sable Ridge development was approved, they actually, as part of that development, they were going to run water from Sable Ridge down to White Road, and that was going to probably get about half of the water in that road there. And that obviously that development did not get completed, so that still kind of is an area that certainly has convenient tie-ins on both ends, has density, and we know that there has been a strong interest expressed there before for that section. So that would be certainly another one to look at. Among other ones, but I think those are a few that certainly.
So what would the total project cost? Let's say that if we pulled Redmond, Country View, and the final stretch, or the rest of Lake Road, what would that cost?
It's about $5 million between the three. Redmond North, I'm calling it North segment between White and 4th section. That's about a $1.4 million project. Country View is about $200. And if you did all of 19, that would be about $3 million project. So you're almost $5 million there.
And I counted 15 in those stretches. I see about roughly 15 of those homeowners represent quality issues. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they would fail DOH standards.
Right.
It just might mean it smells bad. So I think it's hard for us
Certain
to
times a
quantify.
year, they might fail them over other times of the year.
Many, many wells have coliform at the minimum.
So you can see if you look through the three charts, the blue is sort of market cost, green is intermediate level, and then the salmon colored is the poverty level. Right, Jim? If I go astray, stop me.
Right. No. So green is intermediate, and at 45% grant funding. If you look at the Lake Road project, that would be a unit cost of about $1,250. North segment of Redmond, that comes out to just over $1,000.
Jim, at one point you had mentioned to me that you thought we would probably end up at the intermediate level, not at the poverty? Or do you think we could get the poverty?
Well, you can get the poverty if we have that support from Department of Health to show
Poor quality?
quality issues. Without that,
And when you say 10%, do you mean 10% of that whole entire area from 31 to?
well, I would say 10% of the project area.
The project area, what is the project? I mean, the
Well,
whole
if they're doing-
thing, or just?
if they're doing just
it would be
like
the project
road,
that we
Okay, the
decided
road.
to define,
Okay.
because as part of the application, before we start that application, we're going to have to come to consensus on what the
Project
project
Specifically.
Yeah, which specific roads.
Okay,
And so whatever roads you choose, if it's 2, 3, 4 roads, whatever, then I think you want to try to get 10% of those.
Gotcha.
Of those roads.
How selective can we be in turning over names? Is there, can we turn over the homeowners we want the testing to happen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Because I think it doesn't have to be random, as you can just show that there's
problem.
10%, just, yeah, you want to point out where those problems are.
Because if we are unable to do that, if you look at the intermediate level, the green sheet, there are only 3 segments of road that are under the allowable cost per unit. And they are Coble, Capon, and East Canal. Well, Coble and Capon, you can't even get there without doing 19 first. So you have to keep that in mind. So let's presume that we can, in fact, get poverty level. If you go over to that sheet, there's still a lot of the roads are over the $900 threshold. And so, sorry, I'm not pointing out which columns I'm looking at. It's the second column from the right. Second column in from the right. Okay? That's the total annual cost. That's the debt service plus the cost of water. You have to factor both in. So if you look at the green sheet versus the orange sheet, you can see why we want to get under that poverty level. Because then that brings a lot more projects within the realm of possibility.
For sure.
And just one thing I'll point out on the orange sheet, the poverty level, is there's 2 columns at the end there. The second last column, that's based on if we got the 75% max grant, and you'll see some of those are below 900. But a lot of times, RD will fund you enough to get that 2% of the MHI, which, like I said, is about $900. So more than likely, that's probably where you'd land.
And Cynthia said that specifically. She said essentially they take your total project back into a number in terms of the grant that gets you, and the interest rate that gets you to the 900. You're not going to be below 900 in most instances.
And once again, that's based on, we're estimating a water cost of, metered water cost of $326, which is an average and probably is a little bit on the conservative side, depending on how many people are living in the household.
It's a big difference, though, between poverty and interim.
Yeah.
It is,
Much less market rate, right? The blue.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's completely unaffordable. That's the one with Gordon Road at $14,000 a year.
Oh, my.
Can I ask a question? What is being discussed?
We're talking about water districts tonight. Okay.
And does the recreation of a road system also become part of the?
Well, that was the second thing on the agenda, right? So we did talk about that earlier, but that has nothing to do with the water systems we're talking about now. Okay, Mrs. Farley?
Okay.
And this would not, this should not, I can't think of any way that this impacts your property. Okay, so
well, the thing is, I live on a road that's close to Redmond, 4th section. Yes. It forms a 90-degree angle.
Correct.
And not very many people live there, so there's hardly anybody to be directly interested in what happens in that 90-degree angle.
Yes.
And so, that's why I'm here to wonder what
Sure.
it is being planned, because there are not too many humans who need to wonder about what will happen to them.
Well, if you ever have concerns about what's going on, I'm happy to meet with you anytime, okay?
One of my sons will call me from
Yes.
Washington.
Well, have him call and I'll chat with him anytime,
Section
okay?
road is being discussed tonight.
All right. We're not talking about any water plans in 4th section because you have it.
Not water, roads, the
Okay.
road system.
Right, and we're not doing anything to the road, okay?
All right.
All right. So, all right, Jim. Anything else to add?
No questions from the board?
So this is sort of like a Rubik's Cube. And there is no right or wrong answer. We can do anything. Jim will do anything we ask him to with regard to this. He and I have looked this over. The last time we met, he mentioned, well, you look at the number of parcels, you look at how close in terms of the affordability threshold you are, you look at the number of parcels plus that, the total debt service of the cost of the projects and the total cost we might have, Country View, Redmond from 31 to White, and then, of course, finishing out Lake Road. those two, or those three projects in a sense.
5 million.
They hit all the different markers. The other good reason to do Lake Road is, of course, it's the spine off of which really the rest of the water system might be built. Because one of the things that is important here with the Water Authority as we engage in negotiations with them is the hydraulics of the system. And the lake, finishing out the Lake Road stretch would take where the existing terminus, which is right about White Road, probably connect this into the Virgin.
Just around Reed.
Because so you would have, in other words, you'd close a loop. And so it's something that the Water Authority, because remember, they're going to have some say in what we do here as well. And then in terms of the Redmond Road stretch, that would connect between Fourth Section and White Road. You know, one thing that came up, Jim, maybe you could speak to this from an engineering standpoint. Are there any hydraulic problems with the elevation there on Redmond Road? As you're going uphill both directions?
Yeah, actually, you go into a different pressure zone there. Fourth Section is a different pressure zone than White Road is. So one of the things we did show there is you'd have to have a pressure-reducing valve involved, which would step that pressure down.
Backflow preventer? Like a backflow preventer?
It's basically, it's I guess somewhat like that, but yeah, it's a step down to basically equalize the pressures there, going from the higher zones, which is, we're off of that the pump in the Clarendon tank to the south there versus what the Fourth Section road is off of.
Okay. So there would no be, right where Country View is, that's sort of the crest of the Niagara escarpment there.
Yep.
There would be no hydraulic issues in terms of supply there because of the elevation.
No. Okay. Yeah, we could, that's part of what we look at is doing the hydraulic modeling is where to locate that pressure reducing valve, so it's optimized to get, adequate pressures on both ends of it.
Without destroying anything.
Correct.
Yes.
Jim, on West Sweden Road, where are the 3 spots that there's already water? They're on White Road and on Fourth Section Road? And Ladue. So there's one on White Ladue.
What, like past
Comes from
It
Clarendon.
ends where?
They have where the county line between Monroe and Orleans County
Okay.
are on.
So there's one there, and there's one on White, and there's one on Fourth Section. So, what about that? I mean, if there are 3 in a row, whatever, how long is that stretch on West Sweden Road?
Between Ladue
and Fourth Section, however long that stretches, if there are 3
You've got north
sources,
and south here, Jim.
if there are 3 sources of water there already, wouldn't that be kind of an easy, well, nothing's easy,
Right.
but wouldn't that be,
easier?
if the water's already there, it seems like that would be kind of logical.
Well, I guess the only way I'm looking at it is if you're trying to start putting water in where it's going to benefit the greatest area.
And we're talking population?
Pretty much splits the town there. If we start with water on West Sweden, those that are on the eastern part of the town, it's going to be a long haul for us to ever get water over that way.
Okay.
If we're kind of running it down the center, then we kind of run it down the middle. It's easier to split out both east and west for future projects.
So if we're doing that rolling system of doing one
Right.
section a year.
I think, too, if you look at the parcel density, which you can see on this map here, you look at the stretches, especially this stretch of, so are you talking about swapping 19?
No,
for
I'm
West
not. I'm
Sweden,
not
or-
talking about swapping. I was just talking logically. If there are
there's
3 hookups within this 2-mile stretch or however long it is, it seems like that would not be a very difficult thing compared to starting from scratch. But I understand
Yeah.
what you're saying, because you want to have something, so later you can work off both, but it just seems like it's so close.
Yeah, I mean, the only advantage I see of having the three connections would be if you wanted to split West Sweden into 3 phases, because then you could do it because of those 3 connections.
Now, between, do you know what the north and south segments, what the breakup is? Is the north from White to 31?
Or,
you know, for West Sweden, you have on the
yeah,
on
we
the
combine
cost
them here, so I'd have to break that out.
Is north probably, though, from White to 31?
And not from Ladue to 31.
Correct, I would imagine. So it's probably White to the county line is the southern end. Because if you look White to Ladue, there are 13 parcels with quality issues in that section. And there you would have, because Ladue, there's water just over the county line. White, there's already water, so you could even just connect that section, White to Ladue, and there's a ton of quality issues there.
Yeah, I'm just thinking logically, I don't know.
Because there isn't much, there aren't a lot of parcels, and there aren't many people. In fact, there's only one with quality issues between 31 and White. It's the section from White to Ladue that's really bad.
Yeah.
So maybe breaking out West Sweden, chopping that in half, whatever the north and south segment is.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe pull those numbers apart.
It just,
But then you look here, you look at the number of parcels
That's
too. That's the,
Country View in that area.
yeah. Because they've got, remember, orange is quality and quantity. Now, but quality is relative. That's the other thing. I don't know that yellow, it might be deep yellow, light yellow.
Time of year,
You know, people have different tolerances for things.
but if they will entertain the history of it, you know, it's not what there is today, it's what did they go through.
Is that what it's showing?
It's probably a house with a lot of land.
Okay,
Because most of the vacant land, people did not respond.
right.
So this is probably,
Yeah.
yes, it's right. So the
Okay.
agricultural.
Quality or anything else.
And these are all house numbers. You could drive down and find 850 West Sweden and figure out whose house that is. What, somebody here? Okay, yes, 850. Yeah.
That's funny.
So
You
quality
get
and
water.
quantity.
No problem.
Where the E. coli house?
Ah,
And that's a big, that was a big one.
E.
That-
coli is a good one,
That's a
right?
big one for the health department.
That's better than it smells like eggs, right? Probably.
That's better than sulfur, yeah.
It'll get you to smell like eggs.
I think, so Jim, your thought really with 19 was both the hydraulics of it, but plus
Yeah.
that if we're considering phasing this thing out over the next however many years, that's really a starting point. Because then you can start hopscotching each side of the town, maybe do an east side project one year, west side the next, and branch out from there because you've got that center spine done. Plus, Water Authority may be willing to chip in to upgrade that line because you'd be connecting 2 of their existing lines. So we might get a bigger main considering we'd be running water off of it.
So could we have a consideration for the division of West Sweden as well as the Redmond and as well as the 19? 3 considerations for this instead of just the 2 that we've talked about?
I can certainly break those costs out so we know what it is, kind of segmented view of that.
Thanks.
What is the overall cost? Well, we don't really know.
For which one?
So really, to recap, our next big thing is to get water samples where we think we might start a project.
Choose a project and then get the water samples from that project.
Yeah.
I would say for any existing data that's out there, certainly let's get that, and then probably thing to do is set a meeting with the Department of Health and talk about putting together a sampling plan that meets their requirements.
Now, is that something you'd shepherd us through on that, or would that just be?
I'll be glad to help with that.
Because that's the other aspect of this thing, the whole grant writing issue. You know, we've sort of talked that thing over, that there's a department at MRB that handles grant writing. And frankly, the coordination between Jim and whoever at his company is doing the grant writing would be seamless, because they're working under the same roof. Part of me thinks just use MRB to write the grant as well. I don't know. I think there's more inefficiency in bringing in now a sort of a third party to do so. Although we don't have to decide that tonight, but then included in all those, between engineering and grant writing, you would sort of walk us through everything here, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what is our timeline?
Well, as I said before, I'd love to do our best to pick a project and get the application in this year, because I think it gives us 2 quick shots
Head
at
start.
different pools of money. Maybe we get some money this year. Maybe they approve it, they got a pile sitting, and they're willing. Because Cynthia did mention that they thought significant monies were coming back into the kitty this year. So could we get that done? Yeah, probably. It would involve moving very quickly. And then, of course, it would just roll over, and it sounds like, Jim, you were able to track down an answer that we don't have to reapply in 2019. Our application just continues to sit there.
Is this a silly question? Does water quality get better when it gets colder?
That's based on volume. If you have very low water table, you tend to have quality that's not nearly as good. And the flavor sure is different, and the number of minerals and
Dilution.
other things that are in there.
Your well, the more.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't know if heat mattered to,
Well, heat
icky
matters if
things.
it's drying out everything.
So, Jim, and maybe you've answered this, and I just haven't picked up on all of that. There must be, in a way, and I think this is why you're talking about the Route 19 spine, that if we were to develop a strategic plan of the most efficient way to get, like Kevin's saying, that we can do one project after another, even though each one takes 3 to 4 years. Do you have a strategic plan in mind of what would be the most efficient way to develop water or provide water to the whole rest of the town? I mean, we started by looking at how much it would cost to do the whole rest of the town.
Right.
What is there a way we could do that? We could develop that strategic plan of what we would do and in what order, considering that we want to do, I'm just going to pick $1.5 million. What are we talking about tonight? We've got about $5 million altogether. So say we wanted to keep doing $5 million. I think the total projects were $33 million, somewhere in that neighborhood.
Right. Yep.
So that would be about 6 plans. Do we know the best way we would go about doing that? I like to look at things from the long haul.
Sure. Yep.
And then come back to what's the best way to do that. And I understand all the factors that would be taken into consideration with quality and quantities of water and all of that, but still it seems to me there must be an order of events that makes the most sense to have the whole $33 million cost the least amount of money. Is that possible?
Yeah,
Ish.
we could certainly kind of lay out a roadmap with kind of a priority list, year 1, year 2, year 3.
Okay.
And looking at the different factors, quality issue, who has, severe quality issues, where is there strong support, where does it make sense hydraulically to expand?
Right.
I guess as long as the understanding is it would have to be kind of fluid, because
Yes.
because things can change. Next year you may have a development that occurs in this area that
Of course.
they put some main in the ground that makes it that much easier to maybe jumpstart another road. So, but it's certainly something we could put together as a starting point.
Is a general plan,
Sure.
not something that we would absolutely stick to no matter what,
Yeah.
but is to have a general plan.
Yeah.
I think that would make sense.
Well, that is something that we discussed several times, is laying out sort of the phases, if you will, phasing this thing out. And the problem is, until you really pick the first phase,
Right.
it's hard to go from there.
Right.
You have a little bit more clarity on 2, a little less on 3, 4, all the way to whenever.
Yeah.
So the idea, I think, one of the reasons, Jim, when we first discussed this, he said Lake Road is because it is really the spine for all these other roads. So if you start there and you have that big main running right down the middle of town, that you can then supply all of the outlying roads with, Am I mean,
No, you're correct, and I kind of think back to Salmon Creek, and we always knew that was a good area to target for water because there was a need there, they had good density, but if water wasn't up to Swedenwalker Road yet, it just wasn't going to happen. So we knew we had to get water all the way down Colby to Swedenwalker, and then down Swedenwalker to Salmon Creek, which then made the Salmon Creek project a reality. And,
so we sort of
incremental.
Discussed 19, and then the idea was, okay, what can we add on top of 19 and stay within that $4 to $5 million range, and be under the affordability threshold, and that's when Redmond with the country view in there, because of the density, the need, a lot of yeses, only one red on the whole stretch.
Right.
And
It's who wants water.
So
Right.
So if that's phase one, Redmond Road is sort of the smaller piece, because it doesn't really lend to future projects per se. It just connects a loop. It's really Lake Road, I think, is the major infrastructure piece of this thing that makes future projects possible.
The other thing I should point out is, as we decide to, narrow down and define what the project is, and get more into the detailed investigation, we'd want to go out there and start doing some of those rock borings to find out what the actual depth is, because that'll give us a better definition of what our costs are going to be. We tried to be pretty conservative on the overall with what we think we're going to may encounter for the rock depth. But that's a big driver on the project cost here, as you're all aware.
And there is a 10 to 15% savings, as you remember, if we go with PVC. And in my discussions with surrounding supervisors, the source shall remain unnamed, but he told me that his town was able to negotiate with the water authority for replacement with PVC. So remember that whole discussion, if they won't replace PVC? He said they struck a deal. Now, I didn't know that the water authority was that flexible. I'd like to see that somewhere in writing.
It's probably the way it's going to be going.
Well, I think that
PVC, because any new water lines that are developed, people are probably going to choose that.
Yeah.
But didn't we understand when we do PVC, there's also the cost isn't as different as you might think, because we also have to reserve larger amounts. Kevin's saying it may be that we have, we have to observe larger amounts. So the PVC isn't the cost savings that I would have originally thought that it was.
Right.
But Kevin's saying, is there some flexibility in that maybe we don't have to reserve as much? I think that's what you're saying.
Yes, we will go, I'm going to get more information so that when we meet with somebody, Jim, that we can say, hey, we're aware of this unless there's a confidentiality agreement. And we'll pretend we don't know.
In terms of the health department and reports given to them, is that a long-term deal to get the turnaround? I mean, if we're talking about having something in by December, I mean, can they acknowledge these reports on the water condition out here in a short period of time? I mean, are they going to say it takes us 3 months to do that and we'll be beyond your December, or?
Yeah, the health department is usually very good to work with, and I don't see them as being a roadblock. But a lot of it is going to be on the town and the residents to collect that data, because the health department isn't going to send out people to do all the sampling. So,
right.
So that's where the onus falls on the town.
I think realistically, though, that's going to take months. So my suggestion would be we just force the issue. We pick a project, we go for it. If it comes in at the intermediate, because remember, RD backs into a number for you. So if we get the intermediate or we get the poverty level, either way, if RD approves the project, we're going to get the money we need to make it affordable. So I don't think we wait. I don't think we wait for that study.
Okay.
I mean, we're going to have to do it as we go. But I think we start the process of getting this going, because if we don't, we're going to be.
Okay, well, when you said something about the health department, so I just asked because of that. If it makes a difference in getting what we need to have that.
Might I make a suggestion? Instead of the health department, go directly to the Monroe County Water Authority and take a look at their data, or see if you can get their database. Because I know I'm for one who is in it. Other people around us have had their wells sampled. That's the health department still?
Oh, that's interesting too, to see what's already been documented.
Really easy.
Somewhere.
Yeah, and I'm sure there probably is some already out there, and that would be the first, I think, thing
That
we
is
want to
data
do, is
sharing.
find out what's already there,
That
and
would
then
be
find out
fast.
what else we need to supplement that data.
Thanks.
So Jim, maybe pulling together costs on two different projects. The one being the one that you presented tonight, which would be 19 Country View, Redmond, and that's the northern stretch of Redmond.
Yep.
And then take a look at the numbers on West Sweden for the north and the south segments.
Yes.
I think that if the south segment is white and south, there's a lot more quality, quantity issues, and there are a lot more parcels. The northern, from White to 31, there are only
And then the hookups are there.
10 parcels. And most, probably 5 of them look like they're agricultural. So they wouldn't be subject to the, so maybe look at the southern, and so you would match then 19 with the southern stretch of West Sweden. Does that sound like two good options?
Does the
And
health
then you could
department
work-
check your
Instead of
information?
And then you could
Like
work in
HIPAA?
from both
Do you have to
directions
release
also.
that?
You'd have a lot of options.
I wonder.
There's got to be an easy way to get there.
I know.
Jim, was that clear? So that with the southern and the southern West Sweden stretch would be exchanged
South
for
of White.
Redmond and Country View.
Yeah.
So doing
South
that
of White,
instead.
right?
Correct. Does that sound like a reasonable approach to take a look at those two different projects?
I didn't hear all of that.
I like that.
So,
From White to here.
so you're saying, Kevin, we were thinking tonight that we would do Lake and then the Redmond. And now you're saying we would continue with Lake, but you're talking from West Sweden Road south of White. We're going to sub that in for Redmond.
And Country View.
Well, we're going to find out what the staff would do.
These questions have been asked over and over. We don't listen for the answers. So I'm still not sure of my answer because of all the interruptions.
So from White, what I'm saying is 19 and one of Redmond and Country
Perfect.
View, or White to effectively
Okay,
regrow.
thank you.
And if you look, the problem I see with that stretch is if you cut that West Sweden number, let's say you divide it in thirds, because if you just look at the stretch, it looks like one. It may put us over the 5 million mark. But we don't know, because we don't know what the breakdown of West Sweden is.
Perfect. So, but we're not, so at first I thought we were flipping in the almost like parallel track of West Sweden for Redmond, but you're not. So it almost
Correct.
looks like you're increasing the amount, the
Reason
number
being-
of residents or miles that you're going.
That's right. And that's the reason is this northern stretch of West Sweden, very few parcels.
Okay. I didn't
And
have that
very-
map in
in
front of me.
terms of the issues, there aren't as many. You look at all the yellows.
Perfect.
oranges, and
Okay.
reds here.
Thank you.
So,
Can I just make one statement on West Sweden? I know you're excluding the northern part from 31 to White, 31A to White, but there's one house down in particular that is so bad, and I mean so bad with the water, the sulfur, that they can't do anything else. There's another one at the top of the hill that has problems with sulfur too. But I don't know what they filled out and what you have on your, for the north part, but there's a couple of houses down that are in really bad shape. And when I talked to the people when we went through, we did the survey with them. That one in particular is, they have to replace their pipes every 2 years. They can't use the silverware. They eat off the paper plates. They don't have people in their house because the smell is so bad.
Oh, my
They have to
God.
do their laundry at the laundromat. And for 20 years they've been doing this, 25 years.
Oh,
So
I think they've come
if you look at something, for West Sweden Road, which we really appreciate if you look at that part too, I know it's a small concentration of houses, but their problems is severe as much as ours is with E. coli and coliform and other houses down the road too. So you might want to think about that if you for that short distance. Of course, then you got the Niagara Escarpment.
and that unfortunately, that pushes it way beyond what is
I know, but
financially
I'm just saying that.
But remember, this is all not all or nothing. We're talking about doing one every year.
I know, but I
So
just thought
we-
if you're on West Sweden, you might want to consider it. But I'm just mentioning that to those poor people where they had to live for years.
All right.
So in conjunction with that, will we get the long-range plan too, my strategic plan?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Jim and I are committed to doing that. We talked about that.
Perfect.
We've got to get this first one going.
I understand.
And then the rest of it will, I think the rest of it will actually flow pretty well once we have especially if 19 is in there, it'll make the planning easy.
Yes.
Because I think we can go back and forth in a sense and cover everything in a matter of a decade. I don't know. It'll be a long, it's years. But when's the best time to start? We got to get something done now, right? So, okay.
Thank you.
Any more questions for Jim? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jim.
That's great. Thanks a lot.
So if you would just maybe email that to me, and then I'll forward it onto the board, and then we'll keep this going, and hopefully then we're going to have to get a public hearing together too, because it's going to take, once we've decided as a board on a plan, perhaps we can do this by email and have a plan, and then just call a hearing. That makes sense to everybody? Okay, it doesn't mean we have to have a final decision, but I think we should do it relatively quickly. Okay? And it's not an official public, it's not a public hearing in the sense that we're changing a law or rezoning, so I think we can do it faster than the 45 days. Okay? Everybody okay with that? All right, now I need a motion to go into executive session.
Second.
All right, and we will not be coming back to the regular meeting or conducting any further business. Thank you, everyone.
That ought to be very impressive on the video.
Good to her. I mean, if he does this. And then to get her worked up and she comes here and it's sad. I don't know today. It's different every time a little.
I think it's sometime this month.
Hang on, I'll turn off.
Oh, dear goodness.
Okay. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
We're going to put a sleeping